What's on your radar, Robby?
All right, well, Mike is a millennials-focused news website, and in its decade of existence, it has endured pivot after pivot. First prioritizing progressive policy coverage, then expanding into lifestyle and cultural coverage, and ultimately focusing on video content for social media optimization. But after Facebook stopped rewarding Upworthy-style emotional manipulation and canceled a deal with the company in 2018, Mike cratered, laying off most of its staff. But the site still exists. It has not yet pivoted to dust. In fact, it's now owned by Bustle, the same media company that owns The New Gawker, a media attack site that was previously sued out of existence after publishing revenge porn and other misdeeds that we've covered actually on the show because they're fun to talk about, as insane as they were. The current iteration of Mike, however, is clearly trying to recapture some of its former glory by punching above its own weight and has thus found an unsurprising target, Fox News. So a Mike writer named Rafi Schwartz recently attacked Fox hosts Greg Gutfeld and Catherine Timpf for condoning the recreational use of ayahuasca after Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers admitted to using and loving the drug, actually. Schwartz found it odd that Fox News was suddenly, quote, on board with ayahuasca, and he implied that the hosts were only approving of it for Rodgers, in his telling, a Trump-leaning himbo. That's how Schwartz described him, and actually misspelled his name in the process, I noticed. But Schwartz is framing this as an example of hypocrisy, giving readers the impression that this Fox News duo would have otherwise criticized drug use if the subject were anyone else. But they're excusing it in this case because Rodgers is a quasi-sympathetic figure on the right. He was critical of vaccine mandates. He's perceived, I don't know that he actually is Trump-liking or Trump-leaning, but he's perceived that way. So, in any case, this framing is wildly inaccurate and totally unfair. Gutfeld, who hosts Gutfeld, one of the most watched late-night shows in all of television, and Timpf, who is actually now the top female talent on late-night television following Samantha Bee's cancellation, they have actually long described themselves as libertarians on these issues, on drug issues. And just disclaimer, by the way, I appear frequently on Fox News, including on the Gutfeld program, friendly with both Greg and Catherine Timpf, so that means you don't want to hear me defending them. Fair enough, you're forewarned, friends of mine. Okay, if you're still with me, I will continue. So both Greg and Catherine Timpf have expressed the view that even heroin could be legalized. Timpf has written in favor of legalizing marijuana, magic mushrooms, etc. I have spoken out against the war on drugs consistently and repeatedly throughout my entire career on television, in columns and speeches, as well as on social media, Timpf told me in an email yesterday. I've repeatedly said that no drug should be illegal, and I have never said the opposite. This is also far from the first time I have publicly discussed the potential mental health benefits of psychedelic drugs. Schwartz also attacked her for describing ayahuasca as not like a party drug, as if she was trying to rationalize some unbalanced stance. Writing, Schwartz wrote this: it's important to note there's a fair amount of hypocrisy in Timpf's ayahuasca enthusiasm, and particularly her assertion that it's okay since it's not like a party drug, as if other substances that could be easily written off as such don't also have their own medicinal, psychological, and cultural benefits, and even if they didn't, who cares, don't be a narc. All it took was a Trump-supporting, handsome, white guy, multimillionaire athlete to get the ball rolling, Schwartz concluded. He did not respond to a request for comment from me. Timpf's views, again, are neither hypocritical nor newly discovered nor due to Trump. She has long advocated legalizing all drugs, including both ayahuasca and party drugs. And she told me to accuse me of hypocrisy, given my perfect record of consistency on this issue, is absurd. So she notes that she raised these issues with Schwartz, tagging him on Twitter, but several days later, he did not respond or correct what he had written. So writers who want to play media commentators should at least be able to fairly describe the ideologies of the personalities they are scrutinizing. Why is this so hard? Whatever one thinks of Fox News, it's undeniable that Gutfeld, Timpf, and a few other hosts on Fox have actually consistently supported drug legalization. Libertarians, like myself, are glad that this view has powerful advocates on the channel. Advocates that continue to rightly press President Joe Biden to escalate the war on drugs. In fact, here's a question I have. Is anyone on mainstream and liberal TV outlets holding the Biden administration's feet to the fires on this? Look, I admit I haven't been watching very much MSNBC or CNN lately, so forgive me if I missed it. I truly hope I'm wrong. My left-aligned colleagues here at Rising have been very vocal about the need to legalize drugs immediately. Ryan Grimm has talked about it frequently on his radars for the program, and I'm very glad for that. My cursory Googling of the subject of, for instance, legalizing heroin did not suggest that this subject gets very much airtime on CNN and MSNBC. Obviously, Fox talks about a lot of other things too. Many Fox hosts don't share that view. But it should be celebrated that these people in particular talk about these issues. And there was no hypocrisy here. totally imagined. As usual, too many mainstream media and progressive journalists don't understand their perceived foes on the right whatsoever. They couldn't pass for them. They don't understand their views. The conservatives understand the progressives better than the other way around, and it shows in this media coverage that designed to tar someone as hypocritical, total fail once again.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, Robbie, except for the idea that conservatives understand progressives or leftists more. I don't think they know. The whole world pretends that actual leftists don't exist. They do understand Democrats more than I think Democrats understand them, though.
Fair enough.
100%. And it is frustrating that the conversation about drugs, the war on drugs, the decriminalization of drugs and legalization of drugs has become so obscured by the Democrats' right-wing approach on this subject, despite the fact that liberal commentators like Bill Maher accuse people like Joe Biden of being light on drugs and wanting to be hard on police. He has in fact done the exact opposite in the context of his tenure and while he was running for president, saying in the middle of the 2020 George Floyd protests, we need to fund the police harder, and being not only the architect of the U.S. policy on the drug war, but also continuing many of those policies while he has been in office, while plainly ignoring a newly forming coalition of libertarians and people on the right with the left, who has long advocated for reform in this area. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. So often liberals get themselves in trouble when they charge more than they can prove, and when they treat their ideological opponents as caricatures without engaging with them on the substance. And I know that it must be tempting to take someone like Gutfeld's praise of Aaron as kind of inconsistent with his broader worldview, because I do think that there's other parts of their emphasis and other parts of their programming that does show a kind of a lack of sympathy for other people who are caught up in the drug war, or at least ignoring the other groups that are caught up in the drug war. But you have to make the case that you could actually prove, and not try to reason by implication, or you'll get caught up and called out in moments like these.
What do you think is the reason for Biden being almost idiosyncratically, not uniquely at all, but just really bad on drug war issues? Even out of, I guess he's so old, he's out of step with certainly what all young people, young liberals, young conservatives, everyone thinks should be done. But he is really holding the line on keeping marijuana and then on the controlled substances at the most serious, most stringently regulated at the federal level, substances, that kind of thing. Easy fixes, tweaks.
Yeah.
Forget about legalizing heroin. I wish we would, but the simple, the easy stuff, the stuff virtually everyone agrees on, he is holding the line on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question and a frustrating one. It's come up recently in the context of the Brittany Griner case, right?
Yeah.
Where he lacks the moral authority to be very critical of Russia sentencing her to 9 years in prison for having legal prescribed doses of marijuana, like vapor oil or whatever it was, on her person when she traveled to Russia, when he's someone who has supported those same kinds of in really harsh policies here locally in the United States. Some people argue that because he was the architect of the crime bill, because he has been in Congress since he was 29 years old back in the 70s, he just can't get out of a different frame of mind. Some people argue that his own, child's experience with drugs and addiction makes him unsympathetic to the idea of making them more accessible. But I recently did a show with a Columbia professor, Dr. Carl Hart, on my own podcast, where I talked to him about his open use of recreation, not, all drugs are recreational, he would say, but drugs as, perceived to be as serious as heroin. And he is famous for being, a Columbia PhD and professor and doctor who talks openly about how some of these drugs, all of these drugs, need to be destigmatized, but especially the ones that have such high stigma like that. And I wish that were a bigger part of the broader conversation, because I do think there's a lot of coalition building opportunities around this, because people, I think, of different racial groups, of different class backgrounds, have struggled with addiction and understand that further stigmatizing and criminalizing what is a medical condition doesn't have good outcomes. Regretfully, Greg Gutfeld is to the left of Joe Biden on this issue, and I hope that people raising these kinds of inconsistencies on the left among liberals hopes to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.